The Saturday Sabaq. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وهو خير ناصر ومعين. ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه الشريف. I'm very grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us this opportunity to continue with our series of Saturday Sabaq. Alhamdulillah, we were able to present the first series, which was the Qul series, and we looked more at the points of our aqaid from the Quran from there. And then we had the opportunity to do the next series, which was Amthal series, and these were the different parables and the different examples that Allah gives in the Quran. And the intention of looking at those few examples was to be able to try and understand the moral conduct of Muslims. How, as believers, can we morally make the correct choices in our lives? For this new series, alhamdulillah, that we are back with, we have titled it and we have called it the Aqwaam series. So what we're going to do here in this series is, of course, stay focused with the verses of the Quran, but we're going to look at how communities developed in the Quran, how societies developed in the Quran. We will choose a few, and each time that we come to you, we will choose a community, and you will know what community we're talking about because of the flyers that will go on the Instagram page, and then also look out for the quiz that will follow on the Instagram page after the Saturday Sabaq. So in this series, we're going to focus on the gifts and the blessings that Allah gave to that particular community. We'll also look at what challenges and temptations they faced with these blessings that God gave them. And then, of course, we will look at the decisions they made, but not just for an historical overview. It won't just be a review of the past, but when we look at why they made those choices and what were the factors that governed those choices, we're going to try and put ourselves, not only as individuals, but also as communities, together as a collective society. What do we learn from these communities? And how do these communities impact our social and community lives now? This is going to be our framework. And with this framework for the community that we're going to study in this series or in this lecture now is going to be the community of the Pharaoh, as you know, and as the title said. Let's start with a few sets of questions that we have. The first question is, what was this community? What did it comprise of? Who are the community of the Pharaoh? Well, in the Quran, if we seek the answer, we find that, well, Pharaoh himself is so big and pompous that he takes the place of an entire community in the Quran. So sometimes you have Pharaoh represented as a community. Sometimes the people who support him are known as Alu Pharaoh. So you can, do a Quran search and you will see Alu Pharaoh. And these are the people of Pharaoh or the community of Pharaoh. Another word that is used in the Quran for that community is the Qawm of Pharaoh. So sometimes it's like a group of people, a tribe, the tribe of Pharaoh. Sometimes there is another peculiar word which is used, and that word I think pertains more to our times now, because we might not be tribal people, but we are still followers of these kinds of groups, and that is Fir'aun wa mala'ihi. So another name that is used for the community is Mala'a, and loosely translated, it means the elitist group. Mala are people who we might want to call in today's language the influencers, people who can impact not only the way other people dress, other people talk, other people move around and gather assets, but also how other people think. These are influencers, as they are known commonly today. So Fir'aun wa mala'ihi. So mala'a is another word that is used for the community of Pharaoh. But when we go into the Quran to actually look for names, who were the people of Pharaoh? Who were the community of Pharaoh? Then three names just pop up again and again as we look into the narrative in the Quran. We have, of course, Pharaoh, the tyrant, a person maddened by power. And people like this don't become leaders until they have support from groups that are thinkers or the strategizers, people who give them ideas and plans. And in the case of Pharaoh, you find the name Haman popping up again and again. And although these people are clever, they still feed the ego of the tyrant and the ruler. So you have Haman, another name that pops up in the Quran. And then, of course, no machinery can get success unless they have some kind of financial backing. So you also need the rich folk to be there to buttress and to give the support to this kind of a community. And in the case of the community of Pharaoh, the third name that pops up is, of course, Qarun, the person who was maddened by his wealth. So you have these crazy bunch of people, maddened by power, maddened by authority, maddened by their wickedness and then their money. And these were people in charge. And when this group of people become the influencers, then the community is in for a big shock. As we found out, or as we will find out, and we keep finding out every time we read the Quran from the story of Pharaoh. So when I say, who are Alu Fir'aun or the community of Fir'aun? Then that is the answer to that question. Let's put another question for our discussion today. And that is, so what are the blessings, or what can we say were the gifts or the powers, benefits given to this community, the community of the Pharaoh? Well, first we need to start with, they were influencers. So they had this power to impact people. That in itself is a huge blessing, to be able to get one person to listen to you, to be able to get 5 people to listen to you, to be able to get a group of people who will be impacted by your thinking. This in itself is a huge blessing. People of power, people of means, to have the means to change the world. Right? We all dream that if I had this, I would be able to do this good or that good, but not everybody has the means to do it. So when Allah provides a chosen few with the means, then that means also becomes a place of test. Are they going to use it for good, or are they going to use it to advance their own selfish agenda? So they were blessed with power, they were blessed with means, and they were blessed with a unique kind of knowledge, I want to say. Now, I really don't know how to translate this word, but when you look at Murtada al-Ansari's work on, the Pharaoh and how he talks about the community of the Pharaoh, he uses the word magic, actually. Now, I don't know in this 2022 if I can use the word magic, but if I can use the word magic, I would use it in the context of maybe not magic, but those sciences or those ways of influencing the physical part of us and also the intellectual part of us, which are not actually studied by STEM scientists, which is beyond the study of experimentation. If you want to call it magic, for simplifying our conversation today, we can call it magic, but it might not really be magic. So I'm going to just borrow what Murtada al-Ansari says and give it to you. And he uses the word magic. And he says, this is a different kind of knowledge that was prevalent in the ages before, but with the Enlightenment, with the science and the technology movement, people started calling these things as, charlatan tricks and tricks of the trade and things like that, not serious knowledge. But according to Murtada Mutahari, this is a serious branch of knowledge. Not Murtada Mutahari, Murtada al-Ansari. I need to keep myself in check. So he says that in the different kinds of knowledge, you have one knowledge which has become very outdated now, but which was very commonly practiced in the previous era. And that is that people were able to resort to herbs, take plants and shrubs and herbs and put concoctions together which would then soothe pain or heal people, or even make them, physically dependent, if you want, on others. So this was a science, or he calls it magic, and he calls it the natural magic. So to be able to use whatever is available in nature, put it together, and that was a science or a trade that people learned, and then they were able to impact the bodies of other people. Again, people used it for good, people used it for harm, they did it for many other reasons, but nonetheless, this was one way of knowledge or acquiring or practicing knowledge, which he calls natural magic. Another thing he says that was practiced very frequently in the past, and that is the invoking of jinn and angels at the same time, to invoke supernatural ways of impacting the natural world. This is what we might call black magic, or what Murtada al-Ansari calls in his book invocative magic, to invoke supernatural powers to impact the natural world, whatever you make of it. But that is what he says. And he talks about the soothsayers, people who could predict the future. And all this was done very commonly in the past. And it was actually a way in which people acquired this knowledge. But it has sort of become like a voodoo thing now for us now. It's like a trick. Things have changed now. But he says that if you're thinking about the time of the Pharaoh, they were people who used all of these things to impact and to become powerful. A third kind of knowledge that Al-Ansari talks about is talismanic magic. Now, what is talismanic magic? Is something like resorting to the movement of the stars and the planets, and to make predictions and time your wars and time things. If I do this at this time, I'm going to be successful. If I start a business adventure at this time, I'm going to get more money. And in those days, people used to do that. They used to rely on the stars and the planetary movements. This is what Al-Ansari calls talismanic magic. These are his words, right? And then a fourth kind of magic or knowledge he calls illusionary magic. And I think this is probably what we see, in popular TV shows, or if you go to Las Vegas or things like that. This is the kind of magicians that are famous, at least in our day and age. And these are people who can manipulate minds, who can manipulate visions, and who can project illusions with such profess. They can do it so nicely that people who are just watching it will think of it as reality. And these are all those illusionary shows and things like that we watch on Netflix and stuff like that. So this is that illusionary magic, but it is very deep in a sense that it can actually impact the sense of reality of the people. And Murtada Ansari says that the power, or which can even be interpreted as a blessing or a gift that Allah gives to some people, either in the way they talk or in the way they carry themselves or in the way they can express things, is to impact the minds of people, which can be positive and negative, depends on how the user uses it. So Pharaoh and his Qawm had mastered how to manipulate people, how to interject in their perception of reality, make them fear things that were not fearful. What we call today limiting their mind by putting ideas in their mind that would block their own success and their own thinking and make them dependent on the influencers. While I'm saying this out aloud, I'm thinking maybe this is what happens, when we scroll through our Instagram, or when we scroll through our YouTube, or we follow certain people, and at the back of our mind, of my mind, now that I'm saying this, I'm thinking these are influencers, and they're actually manipulating. If not manipulating, if that is a negative word, then at least they're channeling our thoughts. And this is a gift that some people have. And how they use it depends on their own intentions. Are they good intentions, or are they selfish intentions? Nonetheless, however we want to parse it out and dissect this, we have to admit And especially in the light of what Murtada Ansari says, that this group was blessed with this power to impact. This was one of the blessings given to them. But along with this, there was another blessing that was given to them. And that blessing is that they were given constant warnings. This is also a great gift. If the warnings don't keep coming in our lives, especially in the lives of those people who are blessed with the power to influence, with the power to impact, then that power can take us away into a different direction. So one of the blessings is that God keeps sending these warnings. And he did that also for the community of Pharaoh. When all this power and influence was concentrated in one place, and they were wise enough or wicked enough to use it, it was not without God's interjection. What do I mean by the warnings? The Quran says, لَقَدْ جَاءَ آلُ فِرْعَوْنُ مِنَ النُّذُرِ, that many warnings came to this community of Pharaoh. Warnings such as what we read in Dua as-Samat and also in the different verses of the Quran, تِسْعِ آيَاتٍ بَيِّنَاتٍ, the 9 signs that came to them, one after the other. You know, the locust, the frogs that were popping up in their food, the river Nile becoming red, turning into blood, famine, the destruction of their drought, you know, the lice that they had, the infestation, all these things that we hear and we read in the narrative of the Pharaoh. These were also blessings in the form of warnings. Hey, put the brakes on. Do you know where you're going with all this power and knowledge that God has given you? So it came in these phenomena, the 9 signs, as the Quran says. And at the same time, it also came as talking prophets. Musa, Harun, the book, Torah, all this came to them as signs, as warnings, which were actually blessings if they chose to follow those signs. So when we look at the Al Pharaoh, who are they? What were the gifts they got? The next question, perhaps, for our conversation today is, then what did they do with those benefits that they received? Well, with the power and knowledge that they had, they followed a very strategic plan of influencing those who could think. So you have Pharaoh influencing the influencers. And I'll share my screen if I can do it smoothly and show you the verses of the Quran that I'm referring to. So with those who could think, who are the mala, the elite, for those who could think, Pharaoh used his powers of manipulation to gather their minds as well, to make them conform to his way of thinking. And for those who didn't have that knowledge, they started using rhetoric and fear to control the people. So this is what they did with the blessings that God gave them. Recruit more people of knowledge to think the way they think. And those who could not be bothered with knowledge, control them through influencing and fear. Even as I'm talking about the community of Pharaoh, I'm thinking maybe we're not very far from what is happening in our lives today. And perhaps for the later part of this conversation, when we have our conversation partner, and this is another feature of the Aqwaam series, where each time when we have this, it'll not just be you listening to me all the time, but we'll have a conversation partner who will help us think through these challenges in our community lives today. But more about that later. We're looking at this in answering this question as to how did they use those benefits? Recruiting more people who think like them, and those who couldn't bother to be thinking, control them through fear and through propaganda and publicity. I'm going to share my screen here so that you can follow, the style that the Pharaoh uses when he is recruiting more people of knowledge. Now, if you look at these three verses here, and I've made a very simple slide so that you can follow these verses, and also that you can you can see what's happening here. Yeah, let's do that. So the three verses here talk about how the Pharaoh systematically brainwashes the people who have, a little bit of intellect and can think. See how he starts when Musa comes talking about a Rabb al-Alameen. See, one of the first things he does is he says, وَقَالَ فِرْعَوْنَ أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. He said, I am your Rabb. Now, it's very difficult to find a good translation because it says Lord here, but we know that Rabb actually means a benefactor, somebody who provides for you. Now, a benefactor is like not as high as God, but a benefactor. That is why in the Quran, even our parents are referred to as Rabb, right? Kama Rabbayani Saghira. Because they provide benefit. They're benefactors. They provide for us. They take care of us. Arbabum min dunillah. Sometimes God says that they have taken benefactors besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this word benefactor can sometimes be applied to maybe non-deities as well. So you see in this part of the verse, he says, Ana rabbukum al-a'lam. Yani, he's trying to say that there might be many benefactors out there. He's telling his people that there might be many benefactors who can benefit you out there, but I am the highest of those. A'la. So in this statement, he is actually acknowledging, okay, Musa has come, with talking about some kind of a Rabb, but I'm telling you that if you're going to compare what Musa is giving you and what I'm giving you, you'll find that I am higher than what Musa is offering. So you see his rhetoric starts there, which you can say, okay, yeah, at least he's trying to say that he is one of the Rabbs among the other Rabbs. He's starting that brainwashing. You come to the next sequence of his talk, and you see what he says here. He says, "Waqalat." He tells his mala. Now, this is when he's talking to his people, that ma alimta, I do not know of ilahan ghairi. I don't think there is another Lord or another God beside me. So now from becoming a benefactor, he's actually claiming to be a God. But still, he's not saying that there is that he's the only God. He's saying that, okay, I am also a God. Let's look at this verse, correctly. What is he trying to say here? لَإِنِ اتَّخَذْتَ إِلَهًا غَيْرِي لَأَجْعَلَنَّكَ مِنَ الْمَسْجُونِينَ. Says, if you were to take a God besides me, then you would be in the wrong. You're not right. So again, from benefactor, he became God. And now look at the third verse. What does he say? وَقَالَ فِرْعَوْنَ يَا أَيُّهَا الْمَلَأُ مَا عَلِمْتُ لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَهٍ غَيْرِي. Now, starting from a benefactor to a God who acknowledges the presence of another God, he comes to a state where he says, I don't think that there is any God besides me. So he's assumed that supernatural power. And he says, there is no one beside me. I am the only one. I don't know of any other God that exists besides me. So this is a fine layering of how he starts impacting the people of knowledge. Benefactor, a co-God, and then saying, I am the only God. And it seems, according to the story of the Quran, it seems that he was successful in brainwashing those who had intellect. At least most of them. What happens? Why have I put these two verses here? And I've given you the address of the verse, and you can see it. You can see what he starts telling the mala, the elite. The elite start reproducing it exactly the same, verbatim, back to the people. So this is also a machinery that the tyrant uses. Educate a few, and then make those people your microphones to brainwash the other people as well. Now, again, as I'm saying this, I realize that it can be used both ways, for good and bad. But in the example that we're looking right now from the Quran, it seems it's being used for evil. So look at this first verse that comes out, I think it is Shu'ara, where when Pharaoh and his elite group are trying to decide what to do with Musa's message, he says to the mala hawlahu, to the people around him, and this translation calls them the eminent ones, the elite ones, I like to call them. He says, Inna hadha la sahirun alim. This Musa who has come is nothing but a magician. And what does he want to do? Yuridu an yukhrijakum min ardikum bisihrih. His agenda is not spiritual. He doesn't want to elevate you morally. It's just a tactic to gain political power. He wants to remove you from your land. He wants to become king. فَمَاذَا تَأْمُرُونَ? Now your interest is in the land. What do you decide now? There's nothing about religion here. There's nothing about spirituality or morality. This is all just a hoax, and he just wants the land. Now it seems that because the elite were invested in power, they bought this from Pharaoh. And look at these verses of Surah Araf, the one on the bottom of your screen. See that the mala now, قال الملأ, they are repeating the same exact words of Pharaoh back to the community. Now they're becoming the mouthpieces of Pharaoh. Pharaoh just had to manipulate a few people, the elite, and now the elite as influencers are manipulating everybody else. They're doing their job for him. Look at that. They're saying the same words. Inna hadha la sahirun alim. He's just a magician. Yuridu an yukhrijakum min ardikum famadha ta'murun. This man is not interested in your spiritual upliftment, in your morality. He just wants your land. So you will just be serving him. And it's in your interest to serve the Pharaoh and not him. So you see, this is what is happening. I'm going to stop my screen here. And I hope that made some sense to you. I'm going to, give me a minute, just close that. Yeah. So now when all this is happening, we get an idea of how he influenced the thinkers. And what did the thinkers do? They went ahead and they influenced those people who were not bothered to think for themselves. And this is exactly what they did. They said, there's no point. There's nothing about spirituality. He just has political interests. And then they scared them that they still had a job with the Pharaoh. And Musa didn't have any worldly belongings. So if they were to support Musa in overthrowing the Pharaoh, then they would lose the jobs that they already had. So the verses of the Quran then say that very few people believed in Musa with his message. Why? Ala khawfin min Fir'aun wa mala'ihi. Because they were afraid of Fir'aun and his elitist group. Now, with all this that they did, how does the Quran or how does Allah describe them? How does Allah describe this group? He says, these people were not intelligent. They feigned intelligence, but they were not intelligent. وَمَا كَانَ أَمْرُ فِرْعَوْنُ بِرَشِيدٍ. Pharaoh was not intelligent, Allah says. This is not intelligence. وَأَذَلَّ فِرْعَوْنَ قَوْمَهُ وَمَا هَدَى. Pharaoh was not guiding the people. He was misleading them, rather. فَاسْتَكْبَرُوا. Allah says these were people who were arrogant. وَكَانُوا قَوْمًا عَالِينَ. These were pompous, haughty people. They had nothing to do with the benefit of others. They used everything for their selfish reasons. إِنَّهُ كَانَ عَالِيًا مِنَ الْمُسْرَفِينَ. And he was one of the most extravagant people. So this is what happens to This is how the Qawm of Pharaoh is described in the Quran. And this is what the Quran or God thinks about it. But before we end our conversation and invite our partner or our guest for today, I want to also pose a little footnote at the end of this discussion. And that is, okay, so we've seen what were the gifts and what were the challenges, and how, at least in this example of the Qawm of Pharaoh, we find that they failed. God has no praise for them. They failed. But were there any positive reinforcements? Was there anything good about this Qawm? Was everybody influenced or duped by Pharaoh and his power? Or were they people, even if they were few, had some kind of positive impact on the people? And yes, in the community of the Pharaoh, we find a positive reinforcement, at least in the narrative of two people. And you know exactly where I'm going with this. You have Mu'min al Pharaoh and you have Asiya. The Mu'min al Pharaoh, who is referred to in the Surah Ghafir, is again not an ordinary person. He's an intellectual person. He's a person with wisdom, power, means. He's a powerful person. He is, after all, a part of the Mala'. He's the group of the elite, but he has not been duped by Pharaoh. And we see how instrumental he becomes in advancing the work of Musa. He becomes really instrumental in protecting his life and advancing the work. He becomes that inside man in the elite group who knows where his spirituality lies and his faith lies. And then we can't just say that only men of power can do this. In the narrative of the community of the Pharaoh, we have a woman who is a powerful woman. For God's sake, she is the wife of the tyrant. She has that direct access to the person in power. And while Pharaoh is manipulating the minds of the people, Asiya is that one woman who actually impacts the decisions of that tyrant. When she says, let's adopt this boy, he can be a son, qurratu aynun li wa lak. He can fix things in our personal lives. He can fix things for us as becoming, maybe our heir. So I just find that these two positive reinforcements, even if though they are minority, they seem to be so powerful and impactful. Mu'min al Pharaoh impacts the Mala'. When Pharaoh tells them, let's dismiss Musa, he comes up and he says, let's just give him a chance. Let's hear him out. If he's lying, he's lying. And even if he's right, he's still so weak, but we must give him a chance to speak. So he impacts the Mala', and Asiya impacts the tyrant himself. So I think these two positive reinforcements tell us that even if we find ourselves in a community of influencers, in a community of people who selfishly manipulate and impact other people's lives, we can also be people who can infiltrate these elitist systems, change the dynamics of power, and be able to serve justice, even if justice is controlled by a system that is unjust. With that said, I want to end my part of the talking, and I want to invite our guest for today. And our guest is Dr. Insia Aga, who lives and works in Pakistan. And Insia, I welcome you to this Saturday Sabaq Aqwaam series. And I hope we can talk for a few more minutes, around what we shared from the community of the Pharaoh. But before we begin, I want to wish you, this is February, a spiritual month of Rajab and the blessings of Rajab. And also because it's February, to wish you the International Women Physicians Day as well, and to wish you blessings in the work that you do. But I want to invite you to introduce yourself to us and the kind of work that you do, given your context and your profession.
Assalamu alaikum, Mahjabeen, and assalamu alaikum to all the viewers. I don't know how Mahjabeen does this so effortlessly. This is quite the task, but kudos to you. So my name's Insia. I live in Pakistan. And I've actually been born, bred, raised in Karachi. I did go to the US for a few years when my family shifted, but then close to 20, when I was just about to get married, I also got into med school. So I did med school and marriage together, hand in hand. So Alhamdulillah, after that, I had kids. I continued some of my flexible training. So I was able to do some part-time training and then clear some exams in England for pediatrics. So that is my specialty. So yes, so now I've been married, mashallah, almost 25 years, or I think 25 plus years. I have kids who are, one's going to college, one's already in college, and I'm actually back studying to better my degree. So the quest for knowledge continues. So other than that, in my work experience, I've been able to do, I've been blessed actually with a lot of good opportunities. So I worked until recently in a community hospital in an underprivileged area where I was able to serve, children and counsel the parents, things like that. I've done some telemedicine with a big hospital in Karachi where, remotely while sitting at my house, I can see kids in rural areas and they have access to good healthcare. And then they just buy the medicine or, take the counseling and manage that locally. And the best of this whole journey of mine has been the ability and to serve Imam Hussain, and it's really just an honor because I'm really not worth it. But in the Arbaeen camps, I have been able to be a doctor in one of the mock-ups for a couple of years, and that has been my high. It's been the most gratifying, and I just feel really lucky to have that. And other camps, medical camps, I also do from time to time. So that's what I've been up to.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Insia, and especially because you're integrated as a person, as a doctor, not just in your family but also in your community, and also serving communities outside Pakistan. So one of the things I think I want to hoping that you can help us understand is that we just heard about how power and knowledge, when concentrates in one area, it becomes a gift but also becomes a challenge for people. So the different communities that you've navigated, and being in Pakistan or in other communities or faith communities, do you see this concentration of power, this concentration of knowledge? How would you describe the gifts of the communities that you've engaged with?
So as you said, there are mala'a and there are elite in every community, and and that could work both ways. So it could be, economic, where, some people are more well off and some are less well off. There can be those who have, and in Karachi, that is there, this strata is there throughout. So there's the very educated, not so educated. Then there's the ones who have all the industries, the money, the power, and those people also have the power. And those people can either help or or not help and make things worse. So we have both. In rural areas, we have feudal lords, who force the poor people because they have no education, no money to work, and like indentured servants. But then you also have philanthropists who, who not only help, give jobs to people. They help them if they have a surgery. Like a lot of these poor people who come to my hospital, they don't have the money for major heart surgery. So most hospitals are set up with a welfare system that you can go and you can apply, and they can, half your bill. And then they have people of the Mala or the who support that. They are at the back funding all these surgeries of poor people, or deliveries, or chemotherapy. Education. So many of our schools in Karachi are run by those who are well endowed with money. And you know what? The other thing good about Karachi and all over, I think, is that our communities are very educated. So if you don't have money, then you have education. So those people can also, help teach or fund the institution. So there's a lot of good work happening in Karachi and all over, in fact, Even in Iraq, I mean, there are people who are funding these mock-ups. They're supplying, the food, all of those things. The harams of Hazrat Abbas and, Imam Hussain, they're doing so much, food and charity work. So it's all over the place.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And truly, I think every community is blessed in some way or the other, right? If we lack some resources, and then there's compensation through other resources, and what you're explaining about even what the world, at least the developed world, will call deprived countries, you see that they're still gifted in so many other ways. But in your experience, have you seen some kind of equity? Are folks Can folks easily or equally access opportunity, get that opportunity to money or that opportunity to work or educate themselves? How have you seen disparities, or what have you observed working in these communities in terms of access?
So, see, with COVID, the problem just multiplied. So we had, people coming to me, Dr. Saab, I had to pull my child out of school because either I had to, feed them or I could pay the school fees. And the school was mostly online. A lot of kids went, out of school just because they couldn't pay the fees, and the parents just, didn't have the money to pay for online, school. That so many of the people put off their medical care, which is, I mean, it's all available, and people have stepped it up in times of COVID and even before that. So there, when people, and come and say, this surgery is, my 4-year salary, I can't do it, my child needs it, then, there's organizations that you have to know how to find these organizations, and philanthropic organizations are there, but to access them, housing, all these things are there. And it's just about, getting an application in, and, what we can do, I think, as those who are a little more gifted or endowed, is to help network people. And when people ask us, I mean, it's our sharaf that we help them. So if you receive a call, or if I received a call from someone, either connect them to someone who can help them or do it yourself. So, and it's not hard. We have lawyers, we have teachers, we have school principals, so many things in our community. I think if we just network well, then a lot of the inequalities that people face, they don't have to, because the resources are there, the expertise is there. It's just a phone. It's literally a phone call. And the other thing that, I feel that when you're also talking to people who are less privileged, it's very important, I think, for us to be kind and not make them feel, and that was Pharaoh's, elitist group that, made them feel downtrodden. But it's hard enough for these people to ask for help anyways. So as a physician, like parents, teachers, they're all Rabb, benefactors in their own way, so part of that is not to make them feel like we're doing them a favor. So literally, when we get an opportunity, we should make them feel that we're doing them, that they're doing us a favor by even asking us. So there is a lot of discrepancy, but there are ways around it for sure.
Yeah, Dr. Ansia, you highlighted two very important aspects, I think. One is that every community has this polarization, people who have so much, and then people who are deprived, this polarized status. And what is needed really is just that networking, just people to connect the two, right? So you highlighted that seems to be something that is across the board, across communities, where you have this polarization of affluence and of need, and what's missing is that connector. It's something to connect them. And then, of course, the second thing that you highlighted, which is just so fantastic, is that these elite, for whatever negative reasons or selfish reasons, they still had the language to be able to capture that kindness. Because even in the verses that we saw that when the Mala was sort of reproducing what the Pharaoh told them, that this guy is just a magician, he just wants your land. فَمَاذَا تَأْمُرُونَ? So what do you think about it? And the Mala came down and said the same thing to the working class. They said, this guy is just a magician, he just wants your land. فَمَاذَا تَأْمُرُونَ? I think what people are yearning is that kind of humility and generosity. We see in the case of the Mala, which is deployed for a wrong reason. right? But sometimes we see in our communities, even for the right reasons, we become so prescriptive because we have power. So like, you have to do this without giving people a choice, without that humility or that humbleness or that kindness to be able to be those connectors. So I think one of the reasons why these influencers are able to influence is because of the language they use. And their language is so inclusive and kind, like you were saying. And sometimes even in our communities, when we have people with kind intentions, sometimes their language is not kind. And the language can be such a put off where even with the means, they're not able to do the connection. I don't know if that's coming out across, but that is.
It is interesting what you said, because I remember my maid once told me, she said, Baji, we don't need the things that you have or the money that you have. We just want respect. If you can just respect us, and that's what I tell my kids or anybody, I was like, just respect them and have, their staff, they're working in our house, or, they're the people on the street, just respect them. Don't whiz by them in your cars or don't order them around. And, these are things that they're the very fine akhlaq that our imams and our prophet have taught us, but it just needs to come down into the mainstream, and then we can be positive influencers, as you would have said, what you said.
Yeah, I think you hit it right there. To be influencers and positive influencers, we can still learn from these negative examples and pick up those positive traits that they used to influence negatively, and we can probably use it in our lives to influence positively. Sure. Yeah, so I think that's such an important missing link for us. But just dovetailing off of what you just said, you talked about this polarity, and you said all we need is networking, connecting people, even if it's a phone call. In your context and in your experiences, what do you think have been the challenges or impediments for making those connections? I mean, what's stopping people from networking? What are the hurdles? Or is there lack of interest? Is there lack of means? Just in your experience, what has that been like?
Okay, so there are a number of factors. I think one is that someone might feel that they're above this kind of networking. I mean, some poor person's calling you or needs a school, or they couldn't be bothered. So just not this. I think the sense of social responsibility in our community can use improvement, and across the board. It doesn't matter where you're sitting, and to feel that if you have privilege, you have a responsibility. So that, I think, just the awareness that you should do something, and the thing that I couldn't care less, or this is an issue, I couldn't care, or it's not my job, or why should I, or there are other people to do this. So that is one impediment. The other thing is, oh, sorry, I don't have, I don't want to support this cause. So if you don't want to support it with your own, hands, then you can do other things. So that is one impediment, that this is not my job. I don't have the means to do it, but you do have an education, you can teach, you can give your time, you can give your money. There's a lot of ways you can work on social media and promote something that is good. So that is not an excuse, but a lot of people use that as an excuse. And so do we sometimes, we put ourselves first. The other thing, what else could it be? In medicine, I think also, why can't they do this for themselves? Why don't they save up enough? If one person is trying to feed a family on like such a small amount where they can either feed them or take them to the doctor, then how can you expect them to do this for themselves? So I think just finding opportunities to do good things is a way to counter that, blame game. So those are a couple of and the lack of education, Mahjabeen, that's a huge thing. That is, I think, our biggest pitfall, because if we do not educate them or give them the opportunity, or give anybody an opportunity to actually build themselves up. The thing is, you can always give handouts, but to spend that extra money and, give them a business or do small business loans, which is, I'm working with World Federation as well. So that is something that they do. A lot of organizations do small business loans so that people can be lifted out. But because education, and sorry, I don't know if I'm making sense or if I'm rambling, but also there was one other point I had about because if they don't have education, people don't have education, a big problem is then they aren't able to do preventative care. So like supposing that, okay, if your child is low on vitamin D or iron, that you supplement them, but if you don't even see the signs or don't know about it or nobody's educated you about it, then you get to a stage where your child is going through heart failure or, so many other issues, growth failure. So preventative care comes with education as well. And that's something that I've seen, that the lack of education really hampers people.
Yeah, thank you for pointing out. And I think those are, again, very universal detriments, that we have people, the lack of education sometimes, the lack of just that impetus, that willingness to put yourself in the middle of this, you're getting yourself to do it. But I also love the way how you said, we need to cut people slack and give them their space to think what they want to do. Well, thanks for sharing all these things. Maybe one more thing that I'd hope that you can help us think through is of course we've seen the challenges that you've shared in the experiences that you've had, as trying to connect or network or give access to power and knowledge and good health. Are there any examples of positive reinforcements, given your circumstances? Have you come across someone who's made you feel like, wow, there is hope, even if there is darkness everywhere, we can still forge good influencers and a good path ahead? If you want to share maybe a couple of examples.
Okay, so there's this one aunt, a family friend of ours. Her name is Nasreen Karmali, and I spoke to her, took her permission. But she must be, close to her 80s, and she has time. So her house is really near the masjid, and so they bring street children after school to coach them. And because, they can't afford tuitions, their parents cannot teach them because their parents are not educated. So not only do they, so these kids come here, they get help with their homework. And these aunties who, are, some of them are as old as, grandmothers, they are taking out their time in the afternoon to sit and to teach them math and English and sath, namaz and, one or two other things. And then alongside they feed them and they get them warm clothes in the winter. And they have a whole group, a number of people that go every afternoon to do this, and no age is really is a barrier. So there's that. There's different foundations that teach people trades, so there's a Hunar Foundation or all these things where you can teach someone. There are people who are in schools and who actually go up north, and I haven't taken their permission, so I'm not going to say that, but they go up north, they take people up north to see the schools, and then more influencers and more mala come and they support these schools. But it's a huge endeavor to take people up north in the cold, take them by bus to all these little schools, show it to them, and they're doing huge on education. And then there's this one other person that runs a charity organization for surgeries. So what he does is he gives his own earning and he encourages other people to give some money, and he arranges for different surgeries in Karachi to be to happen, like open heart surgeries for poor people, and he has special discounts at those hospitals. And he is doing such a phenomenal job. And, he'd never come to the front, but he single-handedly goes and drops the money off, makes sure the surgeries, and those poor people are calling him all the time. The guy does not sleep. So there are lots of people who, in each field. And then Deen, we should not really forget that our Mala are strong influences of Deen as well. And in these times of inhiraf, where, different ideologies are splitting our communities apart, what the elite do affects what everybody else also does. So if we are good, strong, practicing Shias, and if we are Muslims, then by example, I think people follow and they see who we're listening to, what we're doing. Is namaz a priority? Is honest dealing a priority? Is helping the poor a priority? And I think these all things transcend. So I don't think we should forget that we should work towards, building something for Imam Zamana, a society that he'd be proud of, that he'd be, we need this kind of networking from now, so that when he comes, at least that's something that we can do for him and be spiritual at the same time.
Wow, thank you so much. I think that so beautifully summarizes and sort of connects what we looked at a Quranic community, the community of the Pharaoh, and then, maybe the community given, the context that we live in. And we see, yes, blessings are there. They were there for them. They're there for us. Challenges were there for them, for us. And when we see that the majority is still, deepening that divide of rich and poor, there are still those positive reinforcements who are aware of their social responsibility, of their moral obligation as human beings to be able to bring about some positive change. And I am so empowered and encouraged by the examples that you shared of even elderly women, who are giving what they have more of, and that's their time. To be able to shape these young lives and to empower them with knowledge and food and clothes. And of course, these mala, a person who is a surgeon and who's able to fundraise, or people who can take up people to other places and fundraise. I think fundraising is also such a very important thing to be able to impact the mala or the elite group, and to shift the focus of the majority elite from maybe the selfish, power-driven interests to a more service-based interest and a more positive interest. So thank you so much for talking to us, Dr. Insia. I hope you have a great evening, and wishing you all the blessings for your exams that you're preparing for, and more and more good, inshallah, to come your way. So thank you, everyone. And I want to thank you all for taking this time to attend. And I leave you with the excitement that we will have a few questions coming up on the Instagram page about some quizzes based on this talk. So look out for that. And I leave you with the words of the Quran, with the blessings of Allah and the Ahl Bayt alayhi salam. And I pray that Allah makes your matters easy, and He gives you more influence and power, and gives you the inspiration to bring about more good in the world through those gifts and benefits. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.